Now, Christmases are coming far too fast for some of us, actually, and if you've been racking your brains out trying to decide what to buy for the computer buff in your life, worry no more. We are here to help. John Collar's been looking at some of the choices. Now, John, what sort of things are in the shops this Christmas? And I'm not, of course, talking about rushing out spending thousands of pounds on computers.
No, there's Elite on the BBC Micro, and I must admit I got vaguely addicted to that. It's really rather nice.
Hello, I'm Carl Attrell, and this is Teletext People. Teletext People is a podcast about the people who have been involved in the running of the Teletext services, the people who worked at the Teletext services, and the people who now dabble with Teletext long after its switch off in Great Britain in 2012. Mark Moxon is a self-confessed Acorn and BBC geek, and in this episode, Mark is telling us all about his latest breakthrough in making their classic game Elite exclusively in Mode 7 Teletext style graphics. Mark starts by telling me what he actually thinks of the game Elite.
As far as I'm concerned, Elite's the greatest game in the history of computer games, but that's probably not shared by everyone. But if you are into space sims and flying a spaceship, which to be honest quite a few of us are, then this series of games that started in 1984 are really quite important ones. They're not necessarily the most popular, but in terms of groundbreaking stuff, particularly the first one, I think that they lay claim to being the granddaddy of the space sim, the original Elite. So it came out in 1984, released by Acorn Soft on the BBC Micro, and written by David Braben and Ian Bell. And at the time, nobody had seen anything like it. So it's basically a 3D space game. And the idea is that you're a commander who's got a spaceship. You're given a Cobra Mark III as your spaceship. You're given 100 credits, and that's it. It's open world. And the idea is that you go off and trade between all of these systems, buying all sorts of different commodities, trying to buy them at a cheap price and sell them at a high price, so that you can add cool lasers and weapons and shields and stuff to your ship, and go off and kill pirates. You can be a bounty hunter, or you can attack aliens, you can go mining, all sorts of things. So this kind of stuff is fairly standard really in a space sim these days, but it had never been seen before in 1984, and the graphics alone were absolutely mind-blowing. Wireframe, full hidden line removal, so really felt like you were flying in space. When I was playing this game, tender age of 14, I couldn't believe it. I lived in this game. The immersion levels were really high. Great graphics, great storyline. I mean, the game came with not just a manual that's like really quite thick, about 60 pages or something like that, I think. No, that might be a bit high, but anyway, it felt like that because it was a proper thick manual, but it also came with a book, a novel, that was a story all about the game. So it really sucked you in, and I completely fell for it. When I was flying my Cobra around, scooping the sun to get fuel, I really felt like I was doing that sort of thing. I can think back to it and think, yeah, this really was, I lived in this game. I mean, it's a good job that I didn't have anything recording how long I was actually playing it, like you do these days, with this number of hours you've played this game, because it would be a ridiculous amount, because it was all about, that was the school holidays. I was just playing that game. Absolutely amazing memories. And it has it's a really important part of my looking back on my how I got into computers and stuff. I mean, there is a modern version called Elite Dangerous that's has been around. It's still being released, and stuff's being added, and it really is very much like the core of that game is this 1984 version. I mean, obviously it's completely different these days in terms of graphics and the experience, and it also works in VR. And if I'd have told my 14-year-old self that one day I would be flying around in VR in Elite in a spaceship, and it would feel like I was flying a spaceship, I wouldn't have believed it. It really is quite something. But it all came from this 1984 version, which was just in a 32K micro, and they used some really impressive techniques to generate thousands of systems out of almost no memory. Really amazing stuff. It's beautifully written. It's a seminal game, and really is. I'm still quite excited about it, and it's I don't know how many years ago it is now. Bit maths in my head, 38 years or something since 1984, and it's absolutely still excited about it. So that's Elite. And I can't recommend it enough, really. Even though, it's a little bit dated now, to be fair. The original one, it's an 8-bit machine, but I still fire it up occasionally and just think, wow, this really is still the real deal. Really astonishing stuff. Great game.
I do remember growing up and seeing the Elite for the BBC B. I guess would that be regarded as the BBC's killer app?
Yeah, probably. I mean, you will have some people who will say that there's a couple of other games that are really quite amazing as well. I think if you're into driving simulations, you might argue that Revs, which was Jeff Crammon's first driving sim and probably the granddaddy of driving simulators, you'd probably pick that one. And if you're into adventure games with real physics, and I think they call them roguelikes now, really, you'd probably go for Exile, and these are regarded as astonishing games, but for me, Elite, absolutely, hands down, easily the one, and I think people probably would agree that it's the BBC's best game. I certainly would. Yeah, definitely.
What was the background into Teletext? What was the motivation into rewriting the game just to display, I guess, what you would class as Mode 7 Teletext graphics?
Yeah, so it harks back to the first lockdown in 2020 when I got furloughed along with half the nation. I was sitting around at home, bored, not sure what to do with myself, and stumbled across a thread on the Stardot forum, which is a BBC, an Acorn forum, where a guy called Kieran Connell had posted a link to a repository where he'd taken the source code of Elite, which had been released. It was released in about 2000 by Ian Bell, one of the authors. So we've got the source code for the game, and he'd taken it and made it build on modern machines, because the original was built on a BBC Micro, and so the source code is incredibly terse, really hard to work with. You need to do it on a BBC Micro, but he'd taken it and moved it into modern tooling, so it's the same game but buildable on a modern computer. And I'd always wanted to know how Elite worked. It was, it blew my mind so much, and I'm working in software. I'm a coder, so obviously I just thought, well, I've got to have a play with this, and I realised that because I could run it and build it on a modern computer, I could analyse how it worked. And there's quite a bit of analysis already been done of Elite over the years, and people have analysed how the procedural generation works, or how the trading stuff works, and some of the 3D graphics and stuff like that. But only the kind of various bits, not the whole thing. And I thought that would be quite a good project, really, and just start working my way through. I was just interested to see how it worked. The first thing I was really interested in was the screen mode that the game uses, and it's quite unique on the BBC. It's got a black and white high resolution top part for the space view for all the action, and then along the bottom is a 4-color dashboard, which is lower resolution, so a bit chunkier, but because it's a dashboard, that's not such a big deal. And this is it's not a normal screen mode. They hacked the BBC Micro to invent this way of basically changing between two screen modes, like 2/3 of the way down the screen. And I thought, how did they do that? Let me just see if I can work out how that's done. That was how I got into it, really. And this thing spiraled out of control because lockdown, there's an awful lot of time on my hands. And I ended up basically documenting every single line of code in the source code. And what had started out as just me making some notes to myself turned into a kind of epic writing project. So I did that, and I put that up on the web, and that's available on the website. And then I did the other versions of Elite on all the BBC versions, because it was available in various different formats for the various different machines that Acorn released. So that was the project I did during lockdown. Anyway, Kieran, who had put together this original repository that kick-started this whole thing, he got in touch with me not that long ago, only a few months ago, to say that his original plan for his, when he'd put his original repository up, he'd kind of decided to create a buildable version of modern machines because he wanted to create a teletext version of it. This is all his idea. I have no idea how he came up with that idea or why he was inspired to it, but it's just a crazy idea. Yeah, the graphics are pretty impressive in Elite. It's very playable, but they are still old school 8-bit graphics. So the thought of downgrading it into the kind of blocky sixel graphics that you get on Teletext was just, it seemed a bit nuts, really. But anyway, he is part of the Bit Shifters collective, who make demos on the BBC Micro. So really impressive graphical demos and sound demos that push the machines to their limits. So these are on the original machines, but we're talking about modern coding. And one of the ones they did was a Mode 7 demo. And they also did the Bad Apple demo, which is a very one that people get running on all sorts of machines. They did a Mode 7 version of that. So they'd already written a line drawing and a pixel drawing routine that used Mode 7. And he was wondering whether it would be possible to take those routines and plug them into Elite. So instead of Elite plotting pixels on the screen and drawing all the spaceships, it would draw it in Mode 7 using the 2x3 sixel graphics that Teletext supports. And having broken down the entire game, I thought, well, yeah, okay, I think that's possible, because at the end of the day, you've got the game is loads of maths and loads of kind of modeling and stuff, all this really sophisticated code. But at the end of the day, it when it's drawing to the screen, it's either drawing a line or it's drawing pixels. And actually, at the end of the day, even the lines are made up of pixels. So if you conceptually, you could just swap out those routines for Mode 7. And I thought, well, it's worth a go, isn't it? And so I started with the iconic title screen, which is basically when you start up the game, this rotating Cobra Mark III comes out of the screen towards you and sits there rotating, and it's a real, ooh and ah moment. The first time you see that, it certainly was back in 1984. So I thought, well, let's see what happens there. I'll plug it into that. That should be a fairly easy one to get going, and it just worked, really. I had to tweak the routines that Kieran had sent just to change it from drawing directly onto the screen to flipping what was on the screen, because that's how the game does its animation. It draws a ship and then it draws the same ship again to get rid of it, using exclusive OR is the technical term. But anyway, it worked. It just worked, and there it was. And the thing is, in this rotating ship looked pretty good. You really wouldn't think individual frames, if I froze it, it looked a bit clunky, but with the clean sort of movement and rotation, it really had a feeling of the same feeling as the original game. And I thought, yeah, okay, this could be quite interesting. So I just worked my way through the code, and everywhere that there was a routine that drew to the screen, I swapped it out for the equivalent to the teletext screen, and I designed the dashboard in Mode 7, because the dashboard is obviously much higher resolution than that in the original game. So I designed a version that worked well in Teletext, and most of the dashboard is like horizontal bars, and of course they're very easy to do in Sixels. They're just just a sort of row of Sixels, and designed there's a 3D elliptical scanner that it shows all the ships on, and that managed to go quite well. I couldn't do all the detail of the scanner, but actually just needed an outline of the ellipse and a couple of lines to make it look 3D, and actually worked pretty well. So mucked about a bit with that, and luckily I found out as well that if I scaled the original down by a factor of 4 in each direction, it fitted really nicely into the resolution of Teletext, which was a bit of luck really, because that makes it really quick. So it really just takes the coordinates that the original game it calculates, divide them by 4, and plot them on the screen, and then it works. It was really surprising, and the result was just it feels like Elite. I mean, I really wasn't expecting this, but there was a point where I went and flew the ship, and had the stardust flying past me and the planet over there, other ships sort of firing at me. I mean, at that point the suns were kind of exploding, so if I looked towards the sun, it all went horribly wrong, but I thought, yeah, okay, that's a bug to fix. But it felt like I was flying in space, just like the original game. I mean, I couldn't believe it, because Teletext it's pretty good for art. I mean, the art, you can do incredible stuff, but it's generally not moving, so that when you're doing static art, you can take advantage of the way that the color codes work, and you're sort of working from left to right and things like that. But when it's dynamic and moving around, you're not really controlling what's on the screen. You're controlling it's the same, it's algorithmic, and I wasn't sure if that would work, but it's surprisingly good. It's a very playable version of the game. It feels like a conversion to Mode 7 rather than a tech demo, which is what Kieran and I had thought it would be. But actually, I think it's quite good. Yeah, I'm quite pleased with it. It's good. So yeah, that's how that came about. So it's all hats off to Kieran, really, because it was all his idea, and he provided me with the routines, and away we went. So yeah, big success.
Yeah, I've been playing it online, and it's very smooth, flicker free, and yeah, it's certainly a game in its own right. Not being overly, not being a hardcore player of it back in the day, it'd be easy for me to pick this up and start mastering it. I was really impressed with it. What sort of limitations did you have to deal with with using the Teletext? I noticed that you had an interesting workaround with the maps.
Yes, that's right. So there's a couple of system maps that you can bring up, and in particular, there's a short range map that shows all the systems in your vicinity and kind of within the nearest 7 light years. And the way that it's done in the game is it's got a filled circle for each system, dotted around the screen of different varying sizes, and next to that is the name of the system. So there's a bit of text, and then there's a circle that shows the distance that you can hop. So it's pretty clean stuff, nice and easy. It's in black and white, and works very well. But it's really difficult to do that sort of thing in Teletext, because I thought first attempt I did was pure text. So I put like an O, I think a lowercase O for the systems, and obviously the text for the name. But then I couldn't do a big circle going all the way around the outside of them. That just wasn't going to happen, and it just looked rubbish as well. So then I sort of mixed up the graphics a bit and text, and that seemed to work okay. But there's a crosshair that you move, because the whole point about this chart is you're choosing where you're going to hyperspace to next. And of course the crosshair is graphical. And if you move a graphical crosshair over the top of lowercase text, it turns it into graphics, because that's the way that the graphics codes work, and it was just carnage. So I tried to change the text into uppercase, because that doesn't clash with graphics, but then all the colors went weird anyway, it was just carnage. I just tried about 3 or 4 different versions, and none of them looked good. I could generate a reasonably good looking static picture of it all, but as soon as I moved anything around, it just all went wrong. So that's when I hit on the idea of the reveal button, which of course is a well-loved aspect of teletext from back in the day, you know, revealing the joke punchline or the quiz answer, that sort of thing. So the way it works in Teletext Elite is when you first go into the chart, it's just the system blobs, and they're just at one pixel each, so it's a kind of array of dots, and you can move a crosshair around those nice and easily. It's really clear, and that works really well. But of course there's no names or fuel distance circle on there, so if you hold reveal, the names pop up, and of course while you're holding reveal, you just get rid of the crosshair and you can't move it. So it managed to combine both, you know, the movement, and then if you hold reveal, it shows the static text. I mean, it works really well, and I thought, yeah, okay, this is quite good fun. So we can have, you know, we can take teletext ideas and sort of roll them in, and that worked very well in that one. So that kind of inspired me to look at this was another of Kieran's ideas. Another of the screens in Elite is the market prices screen, which, you know, when you arrive in a system, you can bring up this screen and it shows you the price in that system of all the different commodities. So, you know, you've got computers, you've got food and textiles, and you've also got narcotics and slaves, which is a bit dubious, but you know, that's life apparently out there in the black. So yeah. Anyway, so this is basically a list of prices, and I mean, one of the things I did when I was a kid, because I had a BBC Micro, and the BBC Micro supports Mode 7 and Teletext, and indeed that's how it starts up. So if you're a BBC Micro user, you're a Teletext fan just by definition, by turning it on. But one of the things I had bought later on in my BBC home life was a Teletext adapter, which I could plug the BBC Micro into the aerial and access CFAX and Oracle through this, you know, through the computer. And one of the things I did, I mean, I was only about 16 or something, so I don't know why I was doing this, because I certainly couldn't invest on the stock market. I was too young, but because, you know, you're sort of thinking, I was curious. So I built a program that would download the share price indexes from CFAX and extract all the prices and sort of keep them in a database so you could see them going up and down over time. I mean, you know, that was pointless, but it was a great way to learn. And you know, so I'm really familiar with that share index page. There were two of them, you know, A to M and N to Z, I guess, and you know, they were in various little formats. I had to write a program to work out, you know, how to work out exactly which price went with what. But anyway, there I am looking at Elite and thinking, this market prices screen, yeah, this is CFAX, isn't it? And Kieran had suggested, you know, maybe we could get a bit of CFAX in there. That'd be quite cool. So there's an option in there. It's not turned on by default, but in the game there's an option you can turn on to change the market prices screen into a CFAX screen. So you get the header along the top. So the page number is the correct page number for the share index page as it was back in the early 1980s. I've got a little ticker that ticks up the page number, and I added in a little code so it would pause every now and then a little bit, so it wasn't just ticking up, you know, it sort of slows down and speeds up just like the old CFAX ticker did. And it even includes the page numbers for telesoftware from 700 to I think 706 or something, so that's quite nice. And it's called Galfax. It's not CFAX because the cops are called Galcops in Elite, so it's an homage to that. So yeah, there's a Galfax header built in there, so that's a bit of fun. So yeah, there's a couple of nice little CFAXy solutions there. You got the reveal button on the charts and a CFAX header. So yeah, it's always nice to put little Easter eggs in like that. Yeah, so that worked out pretty well.
Yeah. It's absolutely brilliant, yeah, and I really liked that innovation on that as well. It was a real nod to CFAX and Teletext. So with the game, what sort of feedback are you getting with it at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, people love it. To be honest, this is pushing the 1980s nostalgia button pretty hard, for those of us of a certain age. I mean, this is the early 80s, right? It's 1984, space games on your BBC Micro in mode 7, teletext. I mean, that's great, isn't it? People love it, and I think they're surprised at how much it feels like the original game. That it's I mean, the nicest comments I've had is that it's obviously been put together with love, and that's exactly right. I mean, I adore Elite and still do, and I'm a big, I've got 4-figure hours in Elite Dangerous, and that says it all, really. It still goes. Love the whole Elite franchise, and to be able to kind of put something together that's obviously been lovingly crafted, it's just great. I think that I've always loved projects like this. I mean, this is just a hobby. It's a bit of fun. It's not it's a spare time programming. It's a nice break from the day job where it can get a little bit corporate and a little bit job wise. And the good thing about these projects is that it's nothing like that, and I think it's much easier to make them really sing if it's something you love. And this combines the BBC Micro, which was my computer from when I was 13 all the way to sort of 20. I think it was all BBC Micro for me. Loved it. Great machine. Still got the same. Right next to me as I speak here is my original Beeb with a telly and everything. Disk drive. Love it. Still sits there. And actually there's a point. It looks beautiful on the original hardware and on an old school TV plugged into it. And there's something warm about the cathode ray tubes. And I have to say that when I fired up Teletext Elite on my Beeb and saw the CFAX header thing that I put in, I was just like, yeah, this is great, isn't it? I mean, so I guess if it's pushing the buttons for me, then it's pushing the buttons for other people, and that's really nice. It's good to be able to bring a bit of a smile to people's lips, really. We could all do with a bit more of that these days, and yeah, it's worked quite well for that. I mean, I haven't actually heard of anybody properly playing it for a long period, which is not the idea. I really don't think that's going to happen. I mean, you've got the original Elite for that, but people have been flying around and dying quite a lot, as you do in this game anyway. And yeah, it's just a really positive reaction. So that's why we do this, isn't it? Really, it's all for fun. So that worked out well.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's nice, and it's nice you got that BBC right next to you. The clunking of the keyboard is something I always remember back in my time at school.
Yeah.
I think the BBC and the computer in schools program is certainly we've got a lot to be thankful for, because like a whole generation of people have come through, learning their craft on these computers, and it's nice that they're still being kept alive.
Absolutely.
With your enthusiasm.
Yeah, completely. I volunteer at the National Museum of Computing up in Bletchley Park, and they've got a room of BBC Micros, and they've also got a whole bunch of Acorn 32-bit machines, which were the next generation, and it's just like a schoolroom. Well, from a very nice school, because obviously there's loads of computers in there. But you walk in there and you think, this is great. I mean, I know that modern computer rooms and stuff have the hardware is obviously well more impressive, but you look at these things and they're built to last. I mean, they're still going strong. Okay, they do sort of give up the ghost every now and then, but they're easy to fix. It's like old school cars, isn't it? You can pop the lid, pop the bonnet, and actually work out what's going on, rather than it being all sealed and confusing. So, yeah, I love these machines. Yeah, really love it. It's great to have it right next to me as I'm working on, modern tech. The real thing is next to it, to be honest. And coding these things is a delight. When you work on these computers, you're working right with the hardware. There's very little. There's nothing between you and the CPU, really, which is a very different experience of modern development, where it's all layers and layers and layers and packages and libraries and operating systems and things like that. This is a really positive way of experiencing technology. Love it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the BBC was certainly quite a unique computer, because it had all sorts of technologies that weren't necessarily being used at the time. I think there was like a device called the Tube that allowed you to switch between processors and things.
That's right.
More than somebody who's just going to be like making a pseudo menu or playing frack at break time is going to be using.
Absolutely. And Elite's actually the poster child for the tube. You can hook up a second processor, it's called. So it's a faster version of the 6502. In the original BBC Micro, it goes at 3 megahertz rather than 2 megahertz, which doesn't sound like very much, but it's quite a lot. It's obviously 50% faster and had a lot more memory. And Elite was released for the second processor, and it's a poster child for that technology. It gives it full color, all loads more ships all loaded into memory at once. It's even got a Star Wars rolling demo with words going up the screen and stuff like that. So they created that for a bit of fun, and that's Color Elite. Unfortunately, I couldn't do Color Elite in Teletext because you just can't get the colors in there, because it takes up a character. So I did think about it, but I'm afraid that Teletext Elite is black and white, but in the space view. But yeah, the tube was really amazing, and of course the BBC Micro, the tube system, one of the second processors that Acorn released was the ARM evaluation system, which contained their new CPU that they developed called the Acorn RISC machine, which we now know is the ARM chip and is powering pretty much every mobile device on the planet. So from humble beginnings, this is where it all started.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I do love the story of the ARM of the ARM processor. So you said that that might be it for Teletext Elite, but if you could master level 2.5 or level 3, you might be able to get your colours. But let's hope we don't have another lockdown to find out.
Well, I mean, the BBC Micro, I think it only. I don't know whether it supports level 3 actually. I don't know if it does. It's the chip is fairly rudimentary. So yeah, I'm not sure. Well, you've got to have something to look into, haven't you? I mean, I've got a long list of projects that I shouldn't be getting distracted from, but never say never.
Speaking of other projects, is there anything else that you've got your eye on at the moment?
Yes, I have a few things. I got one of the other things I added to Elite was a universe editor, so that you can essentially create your own universe around you in game, and add ships to where you want. So you can kind of set up a little universe around you within the game, and then you can press play, and you jump into that little universe that you've created, and you can fly around it, and the ships all come to life and stuff. So that's quite a bit of fun on the BBC Micro. So my plan next is to convert that to the Commodore 64 version, because they're very similar, and so people can have a play with that. That would be good. And I mean, really, I guess the next thing after that is I've done a couple of other source code analyses since Elite. I did one for Aviator and one for Revs. Both of these are Jeff Crammond classic games on the BBC, and he also did an amazing game called The Sentinel. Started on the BBC and was converted to other platforms, and that's another fascinating game. So I think I'm probably just going to have to pull that one apart and see how that one works. There has been some work done on that by others, so I shall be standing on the shoulders of giants there, but I think these detailed analyses of computer games, they are fascinating to write, and people do seem to like them. They really want to know how these things work. So that's probably the next one on the list. But I think I need a bit of a break after Teletext Elite. Really, that was all good fun, and I think the new year I'll be ready for a new project. So hopefully the Sentinel, that will be the one.
Oh, well, one thing I would say about the Sentinel is very similar to Elite with the atmosphere that you get just by the sparsity of the graphics.
Yeah, I mean they're filled 3D, so you look at them and you think they're quite simple, but because of the way they sort of move around, you can pan around. They are really very impressive. I mean that Jeff Crammond is a bit of a genius, to be honest, and the way he wrote stuff is really it's beautifully written code, very tight, And the Sentinel is really, I mean, it's a bit unlike any other game, really. It's a unique game. It's a great game, and you're right, as you say, it looks beautiful. And I think there's got to be some interesting stuff buried within there, hasn't there? I can't wait to find it. But yeah, classic game. Well, if anybody wants to read about all of this, then it's all on a website called bbcelite.com. So go there, have a look. You can download all sorts of things there, Flickr-free versions of Elite, Teletext Elite, the Universe Editor, and of course there's all the documented source code. So, go there, fill your boots, get lost in it. That's the idea. Hope you enjoy it.
Well, thank you very much for joining me, Mark.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks to Mark Moxon there. You can find more details about Mark Moxon on markmoxon.com. The game can be downloaded on bbcelite.com, that's bbcelite.com. Teletext People is presented by me, Carl Attrell, and is a Bite High No Limit production. And if you feel that way inclined, you can rate this podcast. You can also donate via the KoFi link in the programme notes. Any money raised will go towards the hosting of this podcast that I do on Podbean. That's the housekeeping over and done with. Until next time, keep it blocky.